All right, Missy, last week we were mixing drinks with Tom Cruise in Cocktail.
Yes, we were. But this week we're shaking things up in a very different way, aren't we, sister? No beach bars, no fancy bartending, just a guy in a dress trying to land an acting job.
That's right, Tootsie. One of the greatest comedies of all time, and honestly, one of the most unique movies of the 80s.
And we are so diving into it today. So grab your wigs, work on your best Dorothy Michaels voice. It's time for Tootsie.
I'm Amanda.
And I'm Missy. And this is Real Sisters Rewind.
Join us as we go back to the 80s.
Welcome back, Real fans. You're listening to Real Sisters Rewind, Back to the 80s, the podcast for movie lovers who know the best films were made back then. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Missy. And if you love 80s movies as much as we do, then you're in the right place. And you know what else we'd love? A follow, a 5-star rating, and even writing us a quick review. It helps more real fans find us. And as a thank you for bringing people to the 80s fun, we are sending out Real Sisters stickers.
That's right. Just take a screenshot of your review and email it to hello@realsistersrewind.com so we can send you one. All right. Today's movie, this one is special. It's known as one of the greatest comedies of all time, starring Dustin Hoffman in a role that is still iconic over 40 years later.
So, Amanda, I say let's get going. Let's rewind back to 1982 and dig into what made Tootsie an instant classic.
All right, it was December 17th, 1982, the day Tootsie made its big screen debut. Now, Missy, I think if I am doing my math correctly, you were 14 years old when this movie hit theaters, and I was only 6.
Yes. Well, I was 14. I was in my freshman year of high school. And I know we always talk about if we saw it in theaters or not. And I did indeed see it in a theater with my friend Rhonda. We went to see a lot of movies together. And I remember we got dropped off to see it. And we bought our ticket because you had to buy your ticket before. We didn't want to have to stand in line. And we did a little shopping at Cloverleaf Mall. And down by Sears, Brooks store had just opened. It was called Brooks, not Brooks Brothers or Brooks Shoes. It was just Brooks. And I think, do you remember it at all, sister?
I don't.
Okay, well, you were super young. And it wasn't there too very long, but it was, if you can imagine, an Old Navy or a Gap, but it was just women's clothes.
Okay.
But it was like a cheap way to get some cool things that were out.
Like trendy stuff.
Trendy stuff, yes. Because let me tell you, at that time, like now, you can get cute things like at Walmart, right? Or Target.
Yeah.
Kmart didn't have cute things back in the day. And so Brooks was affordable, but stylish. And so I remember that we went shopping there. And Amanda, I loved this movie. I loved it. What about you? Do you remember the first time you saw it?
I do remember the first time I saw it, but let me just go back to your experience real quick. It's perfect that you were shopping in Brooks, the women's clothing store, before you saw Tootsie.
That's right. That's right.
And I'm guessing you saw it at the Cloverleaf Mall cinema.
Yeah, I said Cloverleaf Mall.
Well, yeah, I mean, just you were there shopping, and I mean, did you by any chance get a little Orange Julius?
I hardly ever went to the Cloverleaf Mall where I didn't get a little Orange Julius because they had like little ones for like $1, and
So
you would just get them. And then I don't know if you remember, right across from Orange Julius was like a popcorn ice cream place called Dipper Dan, right by McDonald's.
I do. I
And
do.
a lot of times we would go over to Dipper Dan and get some kind of treat and like sneak it into the movie with
The
us.
movie. And remember, Orange Julius was like right on that corner, right when you
Oh,
walked out
yeah.
of McRae's, right there. And then the
Yeah.
movie was right down. It was perfect.
Oh, it was
Um,
perfect.
so I did not see this movie
Well,
until high school.
well, that doesn't surprise me. Again, I think you said you were 6,
I
right?
was 6, did not see it. I kind of knew what it was, but you are the one who made me watch it in high school.
Probably because I loved it so much. I mean, I remember just the laughter and how clever it was. I mean, I loved this movie from the first time I saw it.
Well, I will tell you this, my memory. I watched it. So this is bringing in a little 90s to our 80s because I was in high school in the 90s. But I had one of those little TVs in my room with the VCR built in the bottom.
Oh, yes.
And we rented it and in my room watched it on that little bitty TV
Crawled
in
up
my room.
on your Annie covers.
It wasn't Annie covers when I was in high school.
I know that, but we sat on your little your bed with the Annie covers on it a long time before you were in high school. You loved your Annie covers.
I can't wait till we do Annie.
All right, so let's talk about 1982. I want to start off talking. I know we usually talk about like music first or whatever, but I want to talk about something that had come out just a few months before Tootsie. On July 8th, 1982, something that is dear to my heart, even to this day, came out. Diet Coke.
Disgusting.
No, not disgusting. I will tell you though, it took me a hot minute to love Diet Coke because my allegiance was to, I'm sure you remember it, to Tab.
Which was also disgusting.
It was not. But it's so funny
I
because,
remember it
I
so
worked at
well.
Dad's office during the summers. And let me tell you, if our daddy was still alive, he would be a Diet Coke drinker because he liked him some Tab. Coffee and
Did
Tab.
he? That surprises me.
Yeah, he drank
I
Tab
thought,
at work. They stacked it up by the cases at Max Construction Company.
I would think that he would have just been a Coca-Cola drinker, like
Well,
straight up Coke.
Maybe he was watching his waistline in his adult years. Who knows?
Well, what I remember is I actually did not know Diet Coke came out that early, but I do remember Tab and I do remember Miss Jan Gordy, your first grade teacher.
Yes,
and
I adore
my
her.
friend's mama drank Tab and they always had Tab at their house. Do you remember that when you would babysit?
Of course. Yes, it was
They
like one of the perks.
They always had Tab. But yeah,
Yes.
to this day, I don't drink Diet Coke at
I know
all.
you don't. You're so good. You eat healthy, you drink healthy. You're so good.
It's not good because if I'm going to have a Coca-Cola, I'm having a Coca-Cola.
But I think they say
that's not good.
They say that's better for you than all the bad stuff in Diet Coke. But anyway, that came out just a little bit before our movie. It wasn't like wide yet. Like probably when I went to the movie, I had a Tab for my drink. Or at that time I may have had like a Dr. Pepper or something, although I loved Tab. But it wasn't like Diet Coke was everywhere yet.
So let me ask, I do need to ask you this because I think it's interesting. So like if you were out with your friends, like you just said, would you have ordered a Tab or would you have just gone, you just know what I'm saying? Or would you have had Tab like, oh, at the office it was there, so I'll have a Tab, or at the Gordy's? Or would you have like actually ordered?
I really liked Tab. Yeah, I really did.
Well, that's why you like Diet Coke. So let me ask you this one more thing. Do you think that Diet Coke is any different now than it was then? You know how Coke has been through some like renovations.
I don't know. You get it cold enough and it's as good as it ever was or ever will be. Like there's nothing like a good cold Diet Coke.
Well,
I'm thirsty right now.
I'm surprised you don't have one beside you.
I know. Well, I was rushing.
Well, we also love to talk about the music. And Man Eater by Hall & Oates was the #1 song in America that week. Watch out, boy, she'll chew you up. I love that song.
Did you?
And yes,
okay, keep
I
going.
love that song.
You were going to say something. Keep going, and then I'll tell you my thoughts.
The #1 album, this is hysterical, was Business as Usual from Men at Work. And a couple of songs from that album, if you don't recognize it right away, is Who Can It Be Now? And then It's a Mistake.
Yeah.
I don't remember how that one goes exactly.
It's a mistake. It's a mistake. I think I'm probably off there, but I will say this. I didn't love Hall & Oates. I didn't love Men at Work. And they, to me, are kind of the same kind of music. Like, I don't know how to explain that because they probably aren't for people who love them, but it's just
kind of alternative, but not.
Yeah, I just didn't like it.
It's not rock.
Right. But I will tell you, I was doing my research and I was looking at the other songs that were kind of in the top that week. And I loved the other top 4 of the top 5. So you had Tony Basil, Mickey. Oh, Mickey, you're so fine. You're so fine. You blow my mind. Hey, Mickey.
That had such a great video, too.
It
so fun.
So cute. So 80s. I have actually a story about that song I'll tell you. Laura Branigan, Gloria. No. Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney, The Girl Is Mine. Mine.
Oh, my gosh.
And then.
The Girl Is Mine.
Ready for number 5?
Wait, I'm not. Go back to Gloria real quick. Was that in a soundtrack? I feel like that
I think it was. Been in a soundtrack. I think it was probably.
Gloria. Okay, go ahead. Last one.
And the last one was Lionel Richie. Truly, I'm truly in love with you, girl.
I don't know that as some.
You don't know.
I know it. I know it, but I don't know it as good as some of the ones that he did. Like, hello. Is it me you're looking for? Also, I wonder if that's where Christine got that name from, truly. Anyway, sorry.
You kind of faded out there, but I know you're talking about Sister Wives under your breath. That's so
the funny. Name, truly.
I know. Christine and Cody on Sister Wives have a daughter.
Yes.
Truly.
That's right.
So quick story. In high school, freshman year, I'm in class. It was science class with a lot of friends, and Mickey is out, but I don't realize that it's Mickey. I'm like, I forget what I sang, but all my friends were like laughing at me kind of behind my back, and somebody was nice enough to tell me I was singing it incorrectly.
What else could look? I am not putting you down here because I am the queen. Kelly Carter and I both, like, we will sing a bad, wrong lyric any day of the week. But what else? Like, I
think I might have thought Misty. Oh, Misty, you're so fine. I don't know. I definitely didn't think it was Missy, but I was off, and my friends corrected me. Well, I guess I should say a friend corrected me in a nice way. There were other friends who didn't correct me and made fun of me in a not nice way. That's not sweet. And you were embarrassed. That's right.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, earlier I said this movie was released in December, and it feels like it seems like a lot of movies that we've covered were released in around Christmas time.
Yeah, you're
especially recently. And I know that's like the holiday season's a big time for movies. Yeah. So it kind of makes sense. But again, we're thinking about Christmas. So let's talk about what was on everyone's Christmas list. When I was researching, I found that Smurfs and Pac-Man were huge at this time for boys and girls, and I can testify to this because they were. And apparently a big item was, and I don't remember this when I read about it, I was like, wait, I'm not sure. Maybe I was too young, was a Pac-Man watch where you could play Pac-Man on your arm. Do you know what do you remember that?
I do remember that. And thinking about it now that you say that, who would have loved a watch like that if they would have been into Pac-Man.
Michael Washam?
No, our dad.
Oh.
Our daddy,
Oh,
do you remember daddy had the watch that had the tiny little calculator on it?
oh, you saying that? Yes, I do.
I mean, he
Like,
loved gadgets and
like
yeah,
that tiny calculator. How many times? First of all, he was a math whiz, right?
right.
Like,
Yeah.
how many times do you think he was like, hold on, let me do my calculations on this miniature calculator?
Oh, well, I worked at Max Construction. And so he would use like an electric mechanical pencil, not electric, mechanical
A
pencil. And
mechanical.
he would use it to press the numbers on. He used that sucker for sure.
That is hysterical.
I know.
That's where you get your like gadget love
I
from.
do love
probably.
a gadget. But okay, so I was thinking about the Christmas thing as well because we always talk
Oh,
about it.
but wait. I've got to tell you my story first about the Smurfs.
Oh, okay. I
So,
didn't realize there was a story.
yeah. So when I said Smurfs, it made me think about this. So,
Okay.
like I said, I can testify to Smurfs being so big. Around this time, and it may have been maybe like a year earlier, but right around this time, I had a birthday party at McDonald's. Shout out to all the 80s kids that had birthday parties at McDonald's. They were amazing.
Right.
And I remember getting ready for that birthday party, and it was rainy. I do remember that. And I, for my birthday, got a pair of blue corduroy pants. Okay. Blue, like royal
Okay.
blue. And also a Smurfette iron on patch that mama ironed on the butt for me. So
on
I
the
had
butt?
on like the pocket, on the butt, on the
Okay,
pocket,
yeah,
on the
I
back.
remember that now that you say that. Yes.
And those, I was so excited about those blue corduroy Smurf pants. Like, so excited. I think I got to wear them to the birthday, but I just remember that memory all entangled in one. Like, I
Oh,
was so
that's good.
excited.
That's good. Well,
Mhm.
actually, that's a great segue to what I was going to share because I started thinking about, being 16 years old or 14. I don't remember how old I was. I'd have to go back and figure it up
14.
again, but I was 14,
14.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I started thinking about like, what would I have wanted for Christmas? And so I started doing some research. I would have wanted clothes, right? I was a freshman in high school. And so I started looking and I was like going through like, you know, um, circulars from 1982. And when I started looking, I realized the fashions, they look a lot like today's fashions, or I would say in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And look, I'm going
Yeah.
to show these pictures to you. Look at these pictures.
Oh
Like,
my gosh. We're going to have to
it's
share
kind
them
of,
with y'all.
yeah, we'll have to put them on social, but kind of that prairie look and the
Yep.
puffy sleeves. It's kind of like that
Yep.
uh,
Kind of.
Laura Ashley, Ralph Lauren kind of look, peplums. And so I was like, that looks a lot
Girl,
like what I would want today. I mean, I not wouldn't necessarily
you
want it, but
you loved a peplum.
I
You
did
loved a peplum.
love
Loved it. I
I
mean,
did.
if we went to a store with mama, because a lot of times I would just be like along for the ride on the shopping trip, and you came out with a dress with a peplum, that baby, we were getting it.
It was
Like,
going home with us, huh?
it was going home with us. Yeah. Loved a peplum.
But
Ooh, and mama loved them too.
she did. But I also looked like at what the guys were wearing, and I swear you could look at an ad from then and see the
Yep.
same guys in the same things today. I mean,
I
their
agree.
styles really don't change much. I mean, it was, plaid button down shirts. I mean, it
And jeans,
was
it's the same thing.
what it was. Yes, absolutely.
Well, I just want to say too, because you mentioned Laura Ashley. Laura Ashley was, let's see, was the Versace of my childhood.
Now
Like,
that's funny. But it was
if
a
you,
specialty store.
oh my gosh, if you had, like, I am telling you, when you would be at the mall and you would pass the Laura Ashley store.
Which we never got one in Hattiesburg.
No. This is when
We
we
had
were
to
either
drive
in
to Jackson or
Jackson or New Orleans.
or Mobile or Mobile.
Yes. Um, But like they were, I can't even explain them and the matching of it all.
Oh, yeah.
The mother-daughter matching of it all. I mean, floral prints for days. Like you think we've got florals now? Absolutely not. It ends with us. They've got nothing on florals compared to Laura Ashley.
That is true.
Like it was nothing. And let me tell you what else they loved at Laura Ashley, a corduroy. Loved a corduroy.
They did love a corduroy. Yeah.
I mean, we have always lived in the deep South, but don't you worry because we'll put on a corduroy from Laura Ashley.
That's right.
Any,
Well, I was talking about, men's fashion too. I mean, it's like corduroys have always been and always will be in fashion for them.
oh yeah,
But they didn't get them
absolutely.
from Laura Ashley.
So just if you don't know the fashion of Laura Ashley, if you're, a little bit younger, I encourage you, just give it a Goog, see what you can find. Is it even around anymore? They had the bedding, everything.
Oh, yeah.
Everything.
As a matter of fact, our first bedding when we got married was Laura Ashley floral bedding with Hunter
And you
Green.
thought you were
Oh, I thought,
to try.
absolutely. Absolutely, I did. All right.
Now,
Well, go ahead.
did you have that bedding when you lived in the house where the shit room was behind you
I did.
with your fancy Laura Ashley
Yeah.
bedding?
I closed that door. It was like that room wasn't there.
Does Laura Ashley still exist?
I don't know. We'll have to Google it because we definitely want to put some of these pictures up on social, and
Oh yeah,
so
for sure.
we'll Google it.
Love it.
We'll Google, or as
Love
you
it,
just
love it,
said, which I've never heard Goog, but
Give it a Goog, yeah.
give it a Goog. I've never heard that.
Yeah. Okay, so also let's talk about some advertisements, commercials.
They really
because
point to the culture.
They
right?
really do.
Yeah.
Especially then, like, I don't know, like commercials to me now are not nearly as emotional or moving or like, I guess because we don't watch them as much
We
now.
fast forward through them. Yeah.
Yeah, or they're just not on if you're streaming. But they were a big deal in the 80s,
Yeah.
for sure. So if you turned on the TV at this time, this is really interesting. You are seeing the beginning of commercials for the McDonald's McNugget that are still going
yeah.
strong today. And this is hysterical. I watched one of the McNugget commercials and there's like all these different people like taking a bite and whatever. And this old man, this older gentleman,
Okay.
takes a bite into a nug and he says, no bones. Like that's his line. Like he bites into it. He's like, no bones. And I was like, ah.
But back in the day, I mean, you only had chicken with bones. And so I guess that was something that they were really
proud
of. I have to tell you, I like a chicken McNugget. I really do.
I used to eat the heck out of some chicken nuggets.
Mix
I haven't
it
had
with
them
a little
in probably
hot mustard and barbecue sauce. Every once in a while, if we're like on a long trip and we go through McDonald's, that's what I'll get, like a 4-piece McNugget.
Yeah.
But there are kids now who won't eat chicken if it has a bone in it. Like I have a lot of friends. I have some adult friends who won't eat chicken with the bone, but for sure their kids won't.
Savannah Westacott does not eat chicken. I mean, if I shouldn't say she will pull it off the bone. If she can like make a detachment, she'll eat it, but she does not.
That's so interesting to me. Well, I looked into some commercials too because I love going back. They have like YouTube videos that have like all these commercials on for the month of that year. Yeah. But I was looking at one and there was this hysterical commercial about furs. And it like you would never see that in today's world, right? If you saw anything, it would be about faux furs. But it was like all these fancy women drinking champagne and like lounging on these chase lounges in their high heels and furs. It was hysterical, but it made me think that I think that this Christmas was the Christmas that Daddy gave Mom a mink coat.
Really?
I do.
I thought you were going to say maybe the Christmas you got.
Nope, that was the Christmas of 1985 because no, it was actually 1985 because I was getting ready
Okay.
to go to Junior Miss, and that's why I
Mhm.
got it because it was going to be cold at Junior Miss. I mean, I didn't ask for it; they surprised me with it, but I still have it. It's an
Well,
heirloom.
you didn't think your embroidered sweatsuits were going to keep you warm enough?
um, this was for when I got dressed, I guess. Fancy.
Story for another time, real fans. Don't worry.
Definitely.
I will fill you in.
Well, why don't we move on to some movie facts and trivia?
Oh, wait. Before you do, I know I keep stopping you like I did with the Smurfs, but I want to tell you real quick. When you're talking about fur coats, it kind of reminded me of this, and I wanted to be sure to share that on the cover of People magazine was Joan Collins, and it says her sexy past over, Dynasty's bombshell explodes divorce rumors. And the reason it made me, I was like, oh, your fur coats, is because I loved Dynasty,
Me
which
too.
was so inappropriate probably for me
Yes,
to
it
watch at
was.
that age. But it was one of those that I would beg mama, like, because it would be my bedtime when it would come on. And I would beg to please let me stay up and watch it. And sometimes she would. But the people on Dynasty used to always wear fur coats. Like it was a thing.
Well, it's funny you bring it up because when I saw that commercial, I actually thought about Dynasty.
Because that's what it was.
Yes.
Yeah. And it took place, I think it was in Denver. It took place in Denver.
Yeah.
And so they were always, having to put their big fur coats on. But yeah, like when I think of that, I totally think of Dynasty. And there's Joan Collins right there on the cover of People magazine.
That
I
is a
loved
hoot.
it. A lot of other people like Dallas during that time, but we were Dynasty people.
Well, guess what? Dallas was
What?
CBS. I told you
That's
before.
right.
We didn't get CBS. But okay, so since you mentioned the People magazine, I will tell you one other thing too then. TV Guide had another comedy family on it, Too Close for Comfort. Do you remember that one? It was set
No.
it was set in San Francisco. I liked it, but it was an older, like the daughters of the family were like adult daughters, and they lived in like this duplex house with their mom and dad. And it was like a red brick house in San Francisco. And the dad was a cartoon artist. It was Ted Knight, and he would hold a cow puppet when he would do his cartoon work. And it was a great show. I loved Too Close for Comfort, but I had really kind of forgotten about it until I saw
Was it?
the
I
TV
bet it was
Guide.
called Too Close for Comfort because they were still living like in the duplex with their parents.
Yeah. Aren't you clever?
Any other like actors, anybody that we would recognize that came out of that?
Yeah, there's somebody who has been in some movies. He played like the gay friend to the girls, and he's an actor you would recognize, but I don't know his name. But maybe we can find it and share on social.
Yeah. Okay. Well, revisiting all the trends make these rewinds so much fun.
It is one of the funnest parts, isn't it?
It is. I love it. And I get wrapped up in it. So you're right. As you said, we need to hop into the movie. Tootsie is a clever comedy. And it actually reflected a lot of what was happening in the world. Okay. When I say that, I mean, not just happening. I shouldn't say it reflected a lot of what's happening in the world. I mean, I think it reflected like the true state of what it's like for women in the workplace, especially.
Well, and I think it was happening in the world. There was a new awareness of it, a new conversation about it.
Yes. It was the beginning of it anyway. And it also, watching this, made me think about, of course, I got some Mrs. Doubtfire vibes.
Yes,
but
me too.
Because of this being in the 80s, it really took me back and made me think of a TV show that I loved so much Bosom Buddies
It did
with
me
Tom
too.
Hanks.
Yes, I loved that show. I fell in love with Tom Hanks in that show. And it absolutely, I thought of Bosom Buddies too when
Yeah.
I was watching it again.
And it was actually in this time period. It ran from 1980 to 1982. Of course, in my mind, it ran longer than that. But
Yes.
from 80 to 82. And do you know who else was in Bosom Buddies? Like, I was looking besides Tom Hanks, the
No.
girl, I don't know her name. I'll look it up to share on socials. But the girl who played Marty McFly's sister in Back to the Future, she was also one of the characters in Bosom Buddies.
And wasn't the other bosom buddy like the guy from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids?
Yes, that blonde-headed guy.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That was
That's right.
such a great show. Well, Tootsie was an instant hit. It wasn't, like you said, Amanda, it wasn't just another 80s comedy. It was smart, it was funny, and it actually had something to say, and people loved it.
Yeah, and the box office numbers prove it. The movie made 241 million worldwide, which was huge in the early 80s. It became one of the highest grossing films of 1982, right up there with E.T. and Gandhi, which we've had to talk about that guy before.
We have.
But
one of the things I'll say is when we go back and look at the movies and where they came out, 82 was a huge year. There were a lot of movies. So for it to have performed so well, kind of this comedy, I think that's really good. And let's not forget to mention it was in our sweet spot of time.
Yep.
It was an hour and 56 minutes, which is we love
barely.
That. Barely made it in. But, Amanda, it had a huge box office success, but the critics, they ate it up. It was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, including Best Picture or Best Actor for Dustin Hoffman, Best Director for Sidney Pollack. How do you say that? Pollack? Cindy Pollack? You know what I do know. Our real fans will let us know if I think it's Pollock.
I think it's Sidney Pollack.
I think it is Pollock. That's it.
Sidney Pollack, yes.
And also Best Original Screenplay.
Yeah, well, it's fair. I mean, that totally makes sense. But the only Oscar, out of all those nominations, the only Oscar went to the brilliant, always brilliant, every time I see her face on the screen, Jessica Lange, who took home Best Supporting Actress for her role as Julie Nichols. And she was truly incredible. And I always, when I see her, can't help in my mind go back to King Kong.
Me too. Absolutely.
I can't help it.
Here's the thing. The entire cast was stacked. I mean, of course, we've Dustin Hoffman as Michael Dorsey and Dorothy Michaels. You had Jessica Lange. You had Terry Garr, God rest her soul. We lost her last year. Dabney Coleman, who is, again, perfectly cast in the role of Ron Carlisle, the director. You had Charles Durning as Les Nichols, and you had Bill Murray as the sidekick friend to Michael Dorsey, Jeff Slater.
Well, Bill Murray in Tootsie is one of my favorite things ever. And I actually forgot he was in it. In fact, he actually wasn't originally supposed to even be in the movie. He was cast later, and his role was completely uncredited in the opening credits because he didn't want audiences thinking it was like a typical Bill Murray comedy.
And actually, Dustin Hoffman fought for him because Sidney Pollack didn't want him. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Dustin Hoffman. Not only was he like dedicated to getting Bill Murray in the script, he is dedicated to his projects, much like Tom Cruise, right? Like he goes all in. And so Hoffman...
sister, wait, you know what? You saying that and Tom Cruise, think about, it's the same thing when Rain Man,
I know.
which I can't wait till we do.
I know, I can't
But it's
either.
a similar, I mean, I know it's a very different role, but it's that same idea.
Yeah, they
So
go
we'll have
all
to-
in. Yes.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
so,
sorry, go ahead.
No, well, what happened is, of course, he worked with a speech consultant to perfect his voice as Dorothy Michaels. But originally, Dorothy Michaels didn't speak with a Southern accent. In
Yeah.
doing the research and working on it, Dustin Hoffman discovered that his voice fell more closely into the range of like that female pitch while he was doing a Southern accent. And so I thought that was really interesting. And
That makes sense though, because I think when he like doing it with a Southern accent brings a softness
yes,
to your words. And
yes,
so he could kind of bring that softness in with the Southern accent. That makes total
yes.
sense.
And of course, he spent hours in makeup, really trying to get his look just right, and worked with makeup artists, etc., to become, to transform into Dorothy. And when he did that, he even walked around New York City in character just to see if he could pass as a woman. Because he didn't want it to be like a caricature, right? Like he
like a
wanted
costume.
yeah, exactly.
I bet he had fun doing that though. Like I bet
Probably
that was fun.
so, yeah.
Well, this is wild. During one of those days out in New York, Missy, as Dorothy, he actually called his own kids to see if they would recognize him, and they did not. So he probably at that point was like, I got this.
That reminds me of that's what Eddie Murphy did when he was dressed up as some of the different characters in Trading
really?
Places. Remember, we talked about it on the pod.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
I remember now. Yep.
And
you're right.
doing something like that's commitment. And Dustin Hoffman, he took it seriously. He even said that making Tootsie changed how he saw women because he realized that he could convincingly look like a woman, but he wouldn't be considered attractive. I actually watched today a little video of him talking about this, and it made him think about how if he was going to be a woman, he'd want to be a pretty woman, and that society really treats women differently based on how they look. And the other thing, what you were talking about, the Southern part, I wasn't planning on saying this, but I had seen it in the little clip I saw of him today. You'll notice when he's playing Dorothy, he puts his hands over his chest a lot, kind of like we might do in the South if we said, bless your heart,
Yeah.
And he talked about the fact that that's not something men do. That is not a gesture that men do. Think about that. They don't put their hand on their heart. And as he talked about that, he said, but it is such a beautiful part of women because it's like something is touching their soul. He said there's something so beautiful about it. And that is how he would connect to Dorothy.
Oh,
so,
are you?
Yeah.
Are you? Are you crying?
Well,
girl?
he was crying, and yeah, I teared up just a little bit when I was sharing his story because he really, really moved him. But talking about all this and the Southern accent and the gentility of it all, I think that we should stop and quickly tell our story about our memo. So,
our sweet memo.
I want you to start us off. Yeah.
Okay, so we had the sweetest Memo. She has passed away now, but she had the sweetest voice. The sweetest little Southern Memo voice ever, and she was very she was so sweet, and she was very well.
She was very genteel and
very genteel,
feminine.
but feminine and polished, and and had all the good Southern graces. And this is when I watched Tootsie for the first time, because we realized, like, we made this connection that
it was Memo.
Her voice, her voice is so similar. And Memo wore glasses.
Yes,
like
those big
Tootsie.
round glasses. Yes.
like Tootsie, those big glasses. And, she had like shorter hair as, a lot of like older women do. But it was always fixed and set and beautiful and perfect. And she always had her makeup on and she was just so lovely and so beautiful. But she had this sweetness about her that was very much like the character of Dorothy in Tootsie.
And I will have to say, Amanda, that I made you laugh several times when Mama would be saying
Yes.
something, and I would just under my breath, I'd be like, Tootsie, and we would get tickled, but in a way that was like loving, like she was so precious, but it was
That
eerie
voice.
sometimes. It was eerie
voice.
sometimes. Yes, yes.
The voice, that sweet, sweet Southern voice for sure.
Yes.
Well, one other thing, or a thing I wanted to share with you, was that this movie had major script rewrites.
Oh, I read that too.
Before it made it to production. The original script, called Would I Lie to You, went through tons of changes, and Elaine May, who didn't even get official credit, was one of the writers who shaped it into what we know today. And it seems like all that work was definitely worth it, but it's interesting that this is like the theme of this movie is what it is. And this woman, Elaine May, didn't even really get official credit for her work.
Well, actually, she was known as a script doctor. Now she had some of her own work out there, but she kind of began to be known in the 80s to be a script doctor. And that would actually be what she would do. She would come in and finesse, and scripts that they were struggling with, she would come in and fix. So that's kind of a cool thing.
Cool. Okay. Well, I like that better then.
So I know I butchered his name in the beginning when we were talking about Sidney Pollack, but not only did he direct the film, he played Michael Dorsey's hilarious agent, George Fields. And I thought he was perfectly cast for that.
Oh, yeah. He was hysterical. I agree. Okay. And get this. He actually didn't want to act in the movie at first, but Dustin Hoffman insisted.
Dustin Hoffman gets his way, doesn't he?
Right? He was a real power player.
Yeah, he was.
Well, thank goodness he did, because the agent character dynamic is gold. And in this movie, and I think it's perfect because it's so early in the 80s, the agent's character is like almost 70s-ish. Like he's kind of groovy. Yeah.
He is like kind of groovy.
Which makes sense, like I said, because it's so early 80s, but it's like his agent's still kind of like stuck in the 70s.
And, we were talking about the cast and how incredible they were and how they made us laugh. But apparently, from things I read, there was so much improv that was happening on the set that it wasn't just those of us who were watching the movie that were laughing. You had Bill Murray, who improvised most of his lines for this movie.
Of course.
And Jessica Lange said that working on this movie, it felt really natural because they were having these real moments on the set and in between takes. And so I just thought that was funny.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of real moments, this is a fun one. The line, that is one nutty hospital that Bill Murray says.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Well, that's one of the examples of his improvised lines, and they kept it, of course, because it was so perfect and fit and was funny in that moment.
Well, that's just one of the many things that makes this movie so great. And I said it before, I'll say it again. Tootsie wasn't just a movie. It was a moment in history. And, 40 years later, we are having fun talking about it.
Totally. But now let's really dig into this movie. We're going to break down Tootsie scene by scene. So grab your best Southern accent, people, and let's go.
Well, our movie is, of course, all about Michael Dorsey, played by Dustin Hoffman, who is a struggling actor in New York. He is talented and great at disguises for his roles. Like we see him like at the very beginning, he's like putting the glue and he's putting on the mustache and all that. But we're going to learn pretty quickly that his stubbornness and his refusal to compromise on anything theatrical keeps getting in his way.
And I wonder when you say that, sister, if he was a little bit like that in real life because he
I
got his way
totally
so
think
much.
so. I totally
in this.
think that Michael Dorsey in this movie, Dustin Hoffman, was just playing himself.
Oh, that's hysterical. And this is where our movie starts, where we get to see this side of Dustin Hoffman or Michael Dorsey. And we see this entire montage of him auditioning for parts. And we see him rehearsing for a play, and he argues with the director about his character's movement in a death scene. And when the director refuses to budge, Michael storms off and quits, even though the play is deep into rehearsals already.
Yeah. And it's funny because, he's an unemployed actor, basically, right? He shares an apartment with his best friend, Jeff Slater, who we talked about, is played by Bill Murray. And Jeff is a playwright. He's written a play that they both want to launch. But for now, outside of little acting gigs or whatever, they are scrapping to get by working together at a restaurant.
That's right. And one night after work, they walk home and open the door. Surprise! The friends are throwing Michael a surprise party. And during this part, we see him flirting with many women.
Yes.
And I'll call
the
you
whole
Mara,
party
this
is of actors.
a different
vibe,
woman.
Yes. He's playing the piano, and you see people sitting in little pods having these serious conversations. I thought that party felt very 70s, Amanda. So it's interesting that you said that about Sydney Pollack.
Yeah. And when his friend Sandy's love interest leaves the party with another guy, Michael consoles his neurotic friend and walks her home. And Sandy is the beautiful Terry Garr.
Yeah, she is beautiful. And I love her on screen. I love her in the role she plays in Mr. Mom, which that's one we've got to do, sister. But I love
She
that.
feels like somebody we could be friends with.
I know. I agree. So he's such the gentleman. He's walking her home, and she's all anxious, isn't she, about this audition for Southwest General, basically a soap opera. And Michael reassures her and offers to help her prepare. And even after they practice the part, he offers the next day to walk her there to the audition and be with her.
And because he like coaches her in her acting. And so he's being supportive and all that. And when they arrive, the audition ends before it even starts.
Yep.
The director dismisses Sandy immediately, telling her she isn't intimidating enough. And Michael watches in frustration as she literally walks into the door to the audition and turns around and they've sent her out. And he's like, what are you doing? So it's that quick.
Yeah. And so Michael, he's taking up for his friend, and he happens to know somebody who works on the soap. And so he walks over to the Southwest General, customer service desk, and he asks to speak to his friend. I don't remember the name. And he finds out that his friend has left the show for a Broadway role. Turns out the role the friend left for was a role that he was up for. And it's the role that his agent, George Fields, who we just talked about, had promised to him.
Yes. Furious, Michael storms into George's office, demanding answers. He passes the secretary and everything. George isn't surprised, and he just has to break it to him that no one will hire him or even see him for auditions because his reputation for being so difficult and argumentative.
Now, Michael, he does not accept it. He's just arguing with him about being argumentative. It was so funny to me. I'm arguing with you that I am not argumentative. And while in the midst of this back and forth, he asked George about Jeff's play. Obviously, he's been talking to him about his friend Bill Murray's play because, and we heard about it in the movie some, at the birthday party some, they were talking about when Jeff's play was going to be produced. But George dismisses him and says no one is going to pay to see that film. Michael believes in it. I have to say, I really loved this. We don't know what the play was that Jeff had written, but man, Michael believes in it. And he decides that he is going to raise the $8,000 himself to bring this play to production.
Yes. Now, since Nowhere will hire him, it's going to be a problem. Michael comes up with the plan. The next time we see him, he's walking through New York, but not as Michael, because remember, nobody's going to deal with Michael. So he's just changed himself. Now he's walking through New York as Dorothy Michaels.
That scene is one of, I would say it's a famous scene from the 80s when he's walking down. The first time we get to see Dorothy Michaels, he's walking down in that crowd of people in New York. It's a great scene. And so he arrives at Southwest General, and I guess he's thinking, since they thought Sandy wasn't assertive enough, he's like, okay, well, maybe, heck, I'm going to try it. And so he goes and he auditions as an actress. Now, producer Rita Marshall is played by Doris Ballack, and she's great. She doesn't have many speaking parts in this movie, but she just has a presence about her. And so she brings Dorothy Michaels to the director, Ron Carlisle, perfectly cast, with Dabney Coleman playing that role. And he immediately dismisses Dorothy, just like he did with Sandy, but I don't think it's for the same reasons. Do you, sister?
I do not. But Dorothy does not leave quietly. She pushes back, calling out the way women are written on the show. She even scolds Ron and Rita before storming out.
And she's doing it in character, right? Like, she's just
totally
being bold. Like, she is playing the role that she wants. And it's a bold move. And so Rita follows her and asks her to come back for a reading. And when she does, Dorothy nails the audition. And despite Ron's doubts, she gets the role.
She does. And so, still dressed as Dorothy, Michael heads to the Russian tea room where his agent George is having lunch. And he sits down with George.
I love this scene.
It's so funny because remember, George has no idea that this is going on. So he thinks this is just this lady off the street. And that this is when Dorothy reveals that he's actually Michael. And George is horrified. And after some convincing, he loans Michael $1,000 for Dorothy's wardrobe. And just like that, Dorothy Michaels is officially a working actress.
That is one of the funniest scenes to me, when he scoots up next to him in that booth and
pinches him.
Yes, that was so funny. So anyway, still dressed as Dorothy. He's been shopping. I love it when he comes out with all the bags. It's almost a Pretty Woman moment, except not. And he's hailing the taxi, and the taxi comes up, and he's like, taxi, taxi. And this other guy gets in it, and he's like, that I was here first, and pulls the man out and hits him with his bag. I just think that's hysterical. But he goes back home, and he's explaining everything to Jeff, who cannot believe what he's hearing. And Michael, his plan is that he's going to stay with the soap opera just long enough to fund Jeff's play. And I think it's so funny because Bill Murray's like, just one thing. Please tell me that the only reason you're doing this is for the money.
Now, the plan is for Sandy to play a part in Jeff's play, but there's a problem. Because they can't figure out now how they're going to tell Sandy that they've got the money to produce this play. Because Michael, aka Dorothy, got the job that Sandy wanted so badly. So Michael makes up a lie. He goes over to her apartment, and she's in the shower, actually, while he's explaining this lie of that a family member died and that they're going to get money that way.
Yeah. I like people who lie about things like a family member dying or something like that. Like, I can't do that. Like, I wouldn't be able to do that because I'd be so scared I would be cursing a family member. Like I just
That would be awful.
It would be hard.
But I think he says his aunt. I think he says somebody like,
he
and so
says
maybe
his
he actually
aunt died.
right, but maybe he doesn't even have an aunt, so it would be like it wouldn't be as bad to say it if you don't even have one.
Well, whatever. I'm not even going to go there. But anyway, he does tell her that, and Sandy believes him. And she's so excited. Like he hands her the script and he's like, we're going to do we're going to bring it to production. And so they make plans to go out to celebrate. And so I think you just said she's in the shower, right? And while she's in the shower, Michael is practicing being Dorothy. Like you see him in a full length mirror and he's like putting his hand on his heart like she does and, kind of doing feminine motions, practicing. And he happens to spot one of her dresses. And so out of curiosity, he like holds it up to himself.
Yes. And then he takes it a step further. He decides to try it on because like we said, she's in the shower. So he's like, great, I can try this dress on real quick. Well, as he's undressing to try the dress on, she walks back in.
Yeah, he's caught, I guess you could say red-handed, but you could say tighty-whitied because he's caught in his underwear. He panics. Yep. And so instead of telling the truth, he just blurts out to her, I want you. And just like that, they take things to the next level, if you know what I mean.
No, and it's so funny. It's what I think is so funny too is his pants are like around his ankles. It's like a whole scene, and he's like, you just see on his face, he's just like, "Oh, Sandy, I want you," and she's as surprised as
she goes
like,
for it. She goes for it, which is hysterical. I do want to say something right here though, because as not cute as Dorothy Michaels is, I think Dustin Hoffman, when he's playing Michael Dorsey in the movie, I think he's cute in this movie.
Oh yeah, he's a cute guy.
Like I don't necessarily think so, but I think he's cute in this movie. Sorry,
you don't think he's cute in Kramer versus Kramer?
Well, now that you say that, maybe.
He is cute in Kramer versus Kramer.
I really want to do that one. I really want to do that one.
We're going to do it because I love that movie.
Well, it did win awards in 1980
in the
because
80s.
It came out in 79. So maybe that's how we can get away with it. But hey, it's our podcast. If we want to do it, we can, right?
That's right, girl.
Okay, so the next day is his first official day as Dorothy. He meets the cast, including Julie Nichols, played by Jessica Lange. She's beautiful, she's smart, and unfortunately, she's dating the director, Ron. He also meets Amanda April, who's played by Gina Davis. And this is one of her first acting roles as well. And the scene where she's like doing exercises in her bra and panties, and he's like,
oh my gosh,
that is so funny to me.
It is. And it was a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, Gina Davis.
Yeah.
Well, Dorothy quickly wins over the cast and crew.
Because she's so sweet.
She's so sweet. But Michael is caught off guard when he learns that Dorothy has a scripted kiss with Dr. Brewster, played by John Van Horn, which I have to mention. Funny his name is Dr. Brewster because he was also the dad in Punky Brewster.
Yes.
The adopted dad.
Oh my gosh, he surely was. And this part's funny to me because whenever he's reading this on the script as Dorothy, everybody's like saying he has a nickname. What was his nickname? Like Dr. Tongue or something like that.
Yeah.
And you can tell he is horrified. And, John Van Horn, Dr. Brewster, is way too excited about the scripted kiss.
Yes, he is. And Michael has no interest in kissing Dr. Brewster. So he improvises. And instead of following the script, Dorothy smacks Dr. Brewster over the head with a folder. And it's really funny because it's also a moment where Dorothy is sort of taking the more like feminist, like taking up for women in that moment.
Yes.
To actually when it actually was just Michael wanting to avoid kissing Dr. Brewster.
Yes. And the director's furious, but it works. And so now Dorothy is seen as the strong, independent type, and the audience loves it. But I want to go back Amanda, real quick and talk about the kiss because, finally Dorothy had gotten out of the kiss, but once they called cut, the Dr. Brewster comes over and not in character, right? And he was telling Dorothy what a great job she did. And all of a sudden he just lays a big kiss on her. And it's so funny because she does nothing. She just stands like a robot looking off into space. She is in shock. And I thought that was just a great scene. It's so funny.
Yeah, that was funny. He definitely still got his kiss. Well, off screen, Dorothy and Julie become close friends because, Julie sees this, like you said, strong, independent woman that the audience has gone crazy for. And so they become friends. And this is a little sidebar because trouble's a brewing because he keeps breaking, when I say he, I mean Michael, keeps breaking plans with Sandy to spend time with Julie because he really wants to get to know Julie. As Dorothy, as a quote unquote girl friend. But anyway, Julie invites Dorothy to her apartment to go over lines for the soap and have dinner. And this is where Dorothy meets Julie's baby daughter, Amy. And Michael sees a different side of Julie. And Julie drinks more than he expected and seems to be searching. She seems a little lost. She's searching for something more in life.
Yeah. And they're having these deep conversations. And in the middle of the deep conversation, Julie talks about how Ron treats her, which he's observed it for himself. He is this egotistical, entitled
Hollywood type.
Yeah. And she also mentions, she's telling him this story about Ron, and she says, and not too long ago, I cooked him dinner and he didn't even show up. And all of a sudden it hits Michael, who, as you mentioned, has been missing things with Sandy. And he realizes that he's supposed to be having dinner with Sandy that night. He had completely forgotten.
Yeah. And I have to say, I have to just interject this here. Sandy, because as we talked about, I don't know if we put enough emphasis on this. Sandy is one of his very closest, dearest friends. So regardless of the little, tumble in the sheets that they had together, we wouldn't want, and I don't think he as a person would want to even treat Sandy this way. Like he cares deeply about Sandy.
Yes,
even though
he values their friendship, but he's not acting
of course.
like it.
Right. And so it hits him. And so that is why he rushes home, changes out of his disguise, and heads over to Sandy's apartment. Surprisingly, she isn't quite as angry as expected. He's able to kind of put her off, and he points this out, but then Sandy drops the big question. Are you having an affair?
Yep. She went to his apartment when he didn't show up, and she saw Dorothy, aka Michael, going into Michael's apartment, and you know what she assumes. Although I'm surprised she would assume that if she saw Dorothy Michaels going in.
She described Dorothy not in the most flattering way. And I loved when Michael said, Sandy, I'm not having an affair with the woman that went into my apartment. It's impossible.
Yes. It's not a lie, right? But it's also not the whole truth. And so
it's not the whole truth, but he was offended by her description.
Yes, he was, because she said something. I saw the fat woman. He said, I saw the fat woman in the raincoat, and he said fat. And again, it's one of these things that he's beginning to realize, and also not just as the character in the movie, but as Dustin Hoffman.
Right, exactly.
Which I'll try to find that YouTube clip if you'll remind me, and we'll try to share it on social with Dustin Hoffman actually talking, and it's years later, about what this role meant.
Yeah, I would love that.
Okay, so as Dorothy, we just were talking about, he's beginning to see what it's like to be a woman in a male-dominated role. And when Ron talks down to her, when she's Dorothy Michael, she pushes back. She starts standing up for herself. As a matter of fact, he calls her like all kinds of these girl nicknames, and he's honey and sugar, and he calls her Tootsie. And that's when she had it. And she's like, my name is Dorothy. It's not this, it's not that, it's not this, and it's not Tootsie. It's Dorothy Michaels. And she, she's setting she's setting a standard that the other women have not seen before. It's really cool to watch.
Yeah, I agree. And this sort of outburst inspires Julie and the other women on set.
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
Yeah. And audiences love it. Dorothy becomes hugely popular, making Southwest General a ratings hit.
I think it's about this time, whenever it's hitting and she's becoming popular, that they do the photo shoot scene. And you hear the Go Tootsie Go song play.
Roll Tootsie Roll. It is.
Oh, I thought it was Go. Go
It's
Tootsie
both.
Go.
It's both. It's Go Tootsie Go. Roll.
Tootsie?
Oh, yes, girl. We will definitely be putting that on some of our posts this week.
Okay. So
some of that music.
I didn't know that.
Don't you worry.
Thank you for just telling me to my face and not making fun of me. But that photo shoot where she's like jumping and wearing all the different things, I love that part of the movie so much. I actually watched it like 3 times when I was watching the movie because it's so
flag. There's like one where it's like American flags.
Oh yeah, and she's got on the red sequined dress, which FYI, that red sequined dress was worn on Heart to Heart. We've talked about that show before. I loved it.
Yeah.
By the girl on that show.
But when I saw the Americana, I was like, what is this, Rocky? Like,
that's actually on the movie poster. That picture is what's on the movie poster.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's very patriotic.
But you know what? As her fame grows, as Dorothy's fame grows, Michael's personal life is spiraling, right?
Yes.
He's stuck in the lie with Sandy. He's now fallen in love with Julie. And he is just way too deep into this Dorothy persona.
Oh, yeah, because he's like living it. It's like a person.
Yeah.
And things are going to get even messier the longer he does this.
Yeah.
Plays this game.
And so George drags Michael to a party. So it's a party. He's there as himself. He's there with Sandy. And guess who else is there? Julie. Now, of course, she doesn't recognize Michael because he isn't in disguise. He's not dressed up as Dorothy.
Oh, that's right. And she has no idea who he is.
Right.
And he awkwardly tries to flirt. He even uses, I think, some of the lines that she says, has told him, like, she just wishes a guy would say. And he tries, he like throws that out.
Yeah.
Like a drink in his face.
Yeah. But here's the thing. He said verbatim what he told her. Like, can't we just pretend that, I don't remember exactly what it was, the monologue, but
like, we're just 2 people and I think you're interesting and want to get to
all
know
of
you
that. And I just really want to rumple in the hay with you. And that's when she throws the drink in him. But I just think that would have been a red flag to me. I would have been like,
how do you know that?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I agree.
But I also think it's somewhere around here where Michael, he's in, like, Dorothy's popular and he's all entrenched in it, like we were said. And he starts telling George, they're walking down the street, and he's telling George, like, I need a special. I've got things I want to say to women. I could do Macbeth. Something like he could play Eleanor Roosevelt. I just thought that scene was hysterical. He is way deep.
Yeah, and he feels like he has a voice for women.
Yes.
Well, now at some point, Julie has introduced Dorothy to her dad, Les. And now she invites Dorothy to spend the weekend up at Les's farm. And so, of course, Dorothy says yes, because he wants to spend the weekend with Julie. And while he's packing, Jeff warns Michael that this is a terrible idea. But of course he goes anyway. And me as a girl, I am already worried about like what all he's packing and how he's going to get through this. Like that's what I am worried about.
I loved it. And I think it was probably one of his improvised lines. Jeff says something like, I'm really worried you're going to burn in hell for this.
That's probably
It's just funny. But anyway, okay. So, Amanda, you mentioned Julie's dad, Les. And I think we have to pause and talk about him for a second because he is just this kind, old fashioned man. And he hasn't dated since his wife passed. And from the moment we meet him earlier in the movie, it's clear Les really likes Dorothy. He has got a crush on her. And so over the weekend that they're staying at his house, it's even more clear. And Michael just has to dodge his advances like all weekend long without like basically blowing his cover and saying, Les, get your hands off me, or something like that.
Totally. And what I think is interesting about it, now that I'm thinking about it, the way you're describing Les being this like kind, old fashioned, really nice man. If Dorothy had really been Dorothy, they would have been a great match.
Yes, they really would have. That's such a great point.
They would have been like, oh my gosh, this is perfect. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But back in New York, things fall apart. Rita tells Dorothy that because of her popularity, the network is extending her contract.
That's right. Now, Michael panics because remember, sister, he was only doing this to get the money for the play, right?
Yeah.
So he calls George. He's desperate to quit. But George is like, hey, there's nothing that we can do. The studio has the legal right to keep you on. It was, it was all in the fine details of the contract. PSA, read your contract.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's been a day, and it's just as he's about to call it a night, and Julie asks Dorothy to babysit little Amy while she goes to dinner to break up with Ron. And this is when we get that hysterical scene where Dorothy is babysitting little Amy.
So funny. And like she's got the baby but she's talking in her Michael voice, and then she goes back into her Dorothy voice and she's covered in. That is a great scene. I love that scene.
Yes.
So she falls asleep on the floor with the baby sitting there playing because she's wiped out. And when Julie returns, she's sad. And so Dorothy is comforting her. They're sitting on the couch together, and Julie's got, she's kind of having this vulnerable moment. And Dorothy is kind of reading the signals wrong. And Dorothy, really Michael, is leaning in. He leans in for a kiss. And Julie is completely shocked. I mean, this is her best friend, right? And it looks like in her mind that her friend has made a pass at her.
But here's one thing I want to say. You said that that Michael read the signs wrong, but I don't even think it was that. I think Michael got so caught up in the moment, he even forgot he was Dorothy because he wanted to kiss her.
Right. That's true.
And
that's true.
Like,
that's a great point.
She was not giving her vibes of wanting Dorothy to kiss her.
No, not at all.
She was just venting and talking and sharing her feelings with her new close friend, and Michael totally
was just into
forgot
her.
He was Dorothy.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah, you're right.
That's
you're
what
right.
it was. But before they get too far in the conversation,
because he's trying to explain.
He's trying to explain, and she's like, "No, it's fine. I'm just, she's doesn't want to hurt her feelings." But anyway, before they get too far into the conversation, the phone rings, and it's Julie's dad, Les, inviting Dorothy out for drinks, and Julie demands that she goes and lets him down easy and explains to him, what the deal is.
Yep. And so Dorothy's trapped. Julie's upset. Les is actually bringing a ring to dinner and he proposes. His lie is crumbling fast. And to make things worse, after this night, he gets home and he finds John Van Horn, the guy who plays Dr. Brewster, is waiting outside his apartment for Dorothy. I mean, the plot thickens.
Yep. And when Dorothy refuses to let him up, John serenades her in the street, drawing a crowd at this point. So desperate to avoid a scene, Michael invites him inside. John immediately tries to seduce Dorothy because he's in the Dorothy outfit until roommate Jeff walks in. So then Dr. Brewster, John, panics because he sees Jeff walk in.
And let me just say, he is a little too aggressive when Dorothy is saying
he
no.
is.
So I'm just
Dorothy's
leave
saying
it there.
no, and he keeps on and keeps on. But then Jeff walks in, and he's like, oh, crap. And so he panics and runs out. And Jeff, watching this unfold, just says, you slut.
So funny.
Bill Murray with his like dry wit.
I know. I love Bill Murray. But look, the night doesn't even end there. Things are continuing to get worse because Sandy shows up banging on the door. So she's saying, let me in. Michael runs to the bathroom. He's scrubbing off his makeup in the shower saying, I'll be right out. I'll be right out. And when he gets out,
I've got soap in my eyes.
Yes, I've got soap in my eyes. He has to face an angry Sandy. And Michael has no way out. He finally just admits, I'm in love with another woman.
Thank goodness.
Yes.
I mean, I guess he just reached his breaking point. Well, Sandy loses it. And she says that she could handle that. But what she can't handle is being lied to. And that's when Michael realized he is behaving just like the jerk director Ron, making excuses without thinking about the women he's hurting.
Yes. So things are coming to a breaking point. So at the studio for filming, there's a damaged reel that forces them to perform live. And before going on, Dorothy visits with Julie. And Julie just says they can't be friends anymore, that she knows Dorothy is in love with her. And that's it for Michael. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Jessica Lange has this like softest, like, I don't know, but then there's also, there's something under it too that's like there's a little bit of crazy there.
I don't know how to too. Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting. But anyway, that's it for Michael. He's lost control. So he makes a decision that if he's going down, he's going big.
Now, and we don't know that as viewers of the movie.
No. We don't know any of this.
This is so great.
Yeah. So instead of following the script, Dorothy is supposed to come out and say whatever she's supposed to say in the script. But instead, she launches into a wild improvised monologue. And remember, they're live. This is tape.
Right.
And that's why he does it, because he knows there's no
going back. Yes. And so he's in the middle of this monologue, which isn't unusual. He did that, or she did that several times throughout the filming, but in the most dramatic moment possible. I think he says something like that he is the brother of the administrator, and he rips off his wig.
Yes.
Right? And the whole country watches as Dorothy Michaels turns back into Michael Dorsey, right there ripping off the wig.
And what I have to say here is, for a soap opera, that's not that unbelievable.
Exactly, it's not. I mean, how many times does Stefano DiMero come back to life?
Exactly. But the reactions, because no one knew this was coming, are priceless. Ron and Rita are horrified. Les and Sandy are in shock. And Julie, well, she storms up and punches Michael in the stomach.
Yeah, she like completely knocks the wind out of him.
Yeah, she's pissed. Dorothy's career is over and Michael is completely unemployed.
Again.
He heads upstate to return Les's ring.
Now, at first, Les won't even look at him. He's horrified. But after,
isn't he like, give me that in the parking lot or whatever, the ring?
He's horrified. But after Michael apologizes and they're kind of like having a beer together up at the bar, Les begins to soften, and he even admits that Dorothy was good company.
Well, Michael then confesses that he is in love with Julie.
And he's not going to give up on her. He waits outside the TV studio when he goes back, and he's hoping to talk to her. So, because all throughout the movie, you would see the actresses come out of the studio and people would sign, autographs. So he knows that's where he can find her. And so he's waiting. He's waiting. She comes out. And when Julie sees him, she walks right past him. Like it's an intentional diss.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But Michael follows her, trying to get her to listen. And finally, Julie stops and she lets him talk.
He tells her the truth. The truth is, really, sister, he didn't ever mean to hurt her. He only did it for the money. And the thing is that pretending to be Dorothy made him a better person.
That's right. And the best line was, I was a better man as a woman than I ever was as a man.
Yep. Just say it again, sister.
I was a better man as a woman than I ever was as a man.
Yeah. He literally walked in a woman's shoes, didn't he?
Yep.
Julie pauses. She's wanting to argue a little bit, but then she softens. And then with a smile and like crossed arms, she says, can I borrow your I think she said your yellow dress.
Your yellow dress. Yeah. Yeah. And he's like, oh, not the yellow one.
Yeah.
And just like that, they walk off together laughing because at the end of the day, they were always friends first. And that they walk off and the credits roll. And I just have to stop right here and say, sister, you're always the one who wants to know what happens. This one, I was like, no. We need I need to know what happened to Sandy. Did they produce the play? What happened?
That's funny because I don't have that thought about this movie at all. I'm just fine with the ending.
I just wanted to know. One other thing about Jessica Lange, I have to say, you may know where she's from, but I feel like I've noticed this from her always. She has a bit of a Southern accent, sort of.
Yes, she does. I don't know. We've got a lot to share with our real fans when we go throughout
I just thought of it.
So, yeah.
I just thought of it when I was thinking about her talking to him in this scene. I notice it every time I watch her act. And I think it's interesting. But okay, real fans, that is Tootsie. So what do we think? How does it measure up in today's world, sister?
You go first. I want to hear what you think.
Oh gosh, this is hard for me because I think it was so funny. I think it's still, we still, just like we talked about with Amanda Thompson and Working Girl, there's still there are still we have some of the same issues as women in society still, although we've made a ton of progress. But I do think, the theme of him walking a mile in a woman's shoes, not only in the place of work, but also in the perspective of the friendships and the clothes and the how you look and how that feels, all of those dynamics was really cool. And of course, that still rings true today because men and women are different. And I'm sure walking a mile in a man's shoes would feel different as well.
Yeah. Well, don't you think the movies, there were a lot of movies over I would say the 70s, the 80s, the 90s that were about that role reversal where you kind of
Mrs. Doubtfire.
Yeah, Mrs. Doubtfire. And then you've got the one with Mel Gibson and What a Woman Wants, I think was the name of it.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But I love it. I think it still touches the heart like it did. I think you're right. It still touches the stereotypes that we have, but I don't think a movie like this could be made today.
I don't either.
I think our culture just wouldn't allow it. And so, I think there's people who have very different thoughts about what this movie would mean or what it would imply. And so
instead of it being, instead of letting it stand as is this
Yeah.
very simple. The plot is actually very simple. The idea of why he got
Right.
in this whole predicament to begin with, but just through that very simple plot, he has all these great understandings and revelations,
Right.
and it's
But society wouldn't allow it today. There would be people nitpicking it and looking into it and either canceling it or hailing it as something that it's not.
That it's not, right.
Yeah.
That it's
and
not.
So
but
I'm just going to leave it at that. It still touches the heart today. Everything you said, I think, is spot on. But unfortunately.
Can I say one more thing about
Sure.
it? Is I think it, of course, the actors and actresses, the enormous amount of talent in this film keeps it going strong no matter when you watch it, what decade you watch it in.
I agree. And who knows, maybe we'll get to a point somewhere in our culture where something like this could be made without being scrutinized and twisted in ways that it wasn't intended. So what I'm going to say is there might not ever be another movie like this ever made, but if you haven't seen this movie or if it's been decades, take off your heels, put on your sneakers, and run, don't walk. Because this one is worth seeing. And so as we end our conversation, sister, around this classic 80s movie, let's give some clues for our next one.
Okie doke. First clue for you. In this film, a seemingly perfect family man makes a single mistake that spirals out of control.
Ooh, good one. All right, clue number 2. A home-cooked meal turns into one of the most infamous scenes in movie history.
And finally, clue number 3. Let's just say that one character's obsession escalates to terrifying consequences.
I'm excited for this one, sister. If you think you know the answer, send us a message on social media or email us at hello@realsistersrewind. We love hearing your guesses.
And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us. It really helps us out and keeps the nostalgia train rolling.
Until next time, Real fans, keep watching those classics, and we will see you for our next deep dive. Bye, y'all.
Bye, everyone. Go watch Tootsie. It's great.